Welcome to Live Well, Dream Big. I'm Suzanne Monroe, founder of the International Association of Wellness Professionals, where I've been teaching people how to live a life of wellness, tap into their passion, and go for their dreams for over 15 years. I believe living well and dreaming big starts with ourselves. This podcast will show you how to create a healthy, holistic life, empower your mindset, follow your dreams, and make a big impact. Let's dive in right now. Welcome to Live Well, Dream Big. Suzanne Monroe here. Have you heard the saying, if you're not growing, you're dying? Do you believe it's true? I believe it has some truth to it, but in today's episode, I'm sharing my own version. And today I'm having a conversation with Laura Albers, one of my team members, and we're talking about growth, specifically how to grow in order to glow, including how to get unstuck and how to become your best self. Plus, Laura and I are sharing some personal stories about how we've struggled along the way, how we've been stuck, and what that really looked like, and then deciding to get on a growth path and what happened along the way. So this episode is for you if you really want to grow either in your personal life or in your relationship with others that you support in your life, or if you're on the path to dreaming big and making an impact. That's all about growing. Growth matters, and how you do it matters too. So let's dive in. Hi, everyone. I'm excited to be talking with you today about an important topic, growth. You've probably heard the quote, if you're not growing, you're dying. And do you believe it's true? I think there is some truth to it, but I always like to say, if you're not evolving, you're standing still. So that's kind of my version of it. And the way I look at it is there's nothing wrong with standing still sometimes. That's might be exactly where you need to be, right? But if you're always standing still, then what happens is you can sometimes get stuck. So I think that being on the path to evolving and growing means different things to different people, and finding out what it means to you is what really matters most, because when you're willing to grow, you get to experience life in a whole new way at a whole new level. And that's really what we're talking about today, how to go from grow to glow and get unstuck and become your best self. And I'm joined today with IAWP Master Wellness Coach, Laura Albers. Laura is also a mental health therapist and the founder of Albers Mind and Body Wellness, and she specializes in productivity and mindset. And those are some of the fun things that we like to talk about together. Hey there, Laura, welcome.
Hello, Suzanne. Great to be here. Great to see everybody, and welcome to all of our listeners.
And I'm glad we're having this conversation today, Laura. I know you've been on a path of growth yourself for many years.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and I'd love to just share maybe, I don't know, just a few things I've kind of learned, I guess, along the way of that journey. And I feel like I'm still on that journey. I mean, I feel like being an entrepreneur, like that's what it's all about. Like you're always going to be sort of on that journey. So a few things I, just kind of wanted to share is like, just this idea that your journey, like whatever's happened, I guess I'll say in this case, like to you has really happened for you, so things that have happened in your life, I think about like all the struggles I've been through, the challenges, the health issues, the setbacks, the procrastination, the mistakes, as well as all the success, has happened for me, and they're part of the journey, they're part of the process, and as long as I can kind of accept that and learn from that and, kind of cheer myself on, just for getting out there and, continuing to try to be of service, like in my mind, that there's never failure in that. So I kind of like threw that word out a long time ago, failure. Another thing I wanted to share, like there's this quote I heard, I know you kind of started with the quote, and I love quotes. This quote is from Drew Canole, and it's, entrepreneurs understand that they are paid not just to work, but to be scared. We get paid to take action most people are too scared to ever do. And that just really hit home for me, because I feel like right out of the gate, like that makes us, brave and bold and amazing, so it's just like not forgetting that, like already by taking this step, you're already in that, in that camp, if you will.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I think speaking from personal experience as well, I'll say like being dedicated to the growth path doesn't mean it's an easier path. Like you said, these things are happening for you. Even though they seem like obstacles, they seem like challenges, like it is part of the path. And being on a growth path doesn't mean there aren't challenges. In fact, I think there's even more when you say, yes, I'm going to go on this path. But that's what really helps you to evolve. So the road can be bumpier, yes, but the rewards of a life of growing, I think, are definitely worth it. So it's really about saying, yeah, I want to become the best version of myself, and I'm willing to go on this path. That's the first step. Got to be willing.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think too, like, I just learned, like, taking action steps, or like, small sort of like baby steps forward, like that's just the best way, I think, to get out of like overwhelm and fear and doubt and feeling stuck. And so I know we've maybe talked about this before, but it's like that fear is going to be with me, or, with each of us, on that journey. So for me, when I feel it, not if, but when I feel it, I'm like, okay, awesome. That means I'm playing a big enough game, so I have the little panic party. And then I DNA, like I decide my next action.
Yeah. I love that. I mean, I think as what we're talking about in today's episode, growth is not something that just happens overnight. It's gradual. So yeah, you have to take those baby steps. It's really a process. It's a process of becoming, in a way,
Mhm.
and to know or feel something more over time is kind of what happens on the growth path. I always like to do my little definitions. And one definition I looked up of grow means to gradually increase or become, or come to know or feel something over time. So I'm like, oh, I think that's so interesting, right? Because it is this becoming, it is this thing over time. And so you can't rush the process. You can't rush growth yet. At the same time, you've got to be willing, you got to say yes to it for it to keep unfolding. We are kind of sharing our 3 steps for today. And the first step I want to say is be willing to go on the journey. So be willing to go on the journey is really step 1. And when we talk about growth for ourselves, I mean, it really is a personal journey. I think it starts with the decision that you want to become the best version of yourself. You're willing to. And it's kind of a way of thinking. It's a desire to say, okay, I'm willing to try and do things differently. And I'm willing to go through challenges too. So it's kind of interesting, I think, being on that path. But I will say I feel like it's also about becoming more fully yourself. And sometimes people say, like, what do you mean by that? Aren't I already myself? Aren't we just who we are? Life just is, or whatever. And yeah, that's true. But at the same time, I believe we all have this capacity to really glow from the inside out, to glow. And this glow comes when we're on purpose, when we're following our passion, when we feel committed to something greater than ourselves, usually. And this is the glow that can come from being on the path to growing, because we put ourselves out there, we try new things, and something kind of shifts for us on the inside, I think. And that's what causes us to glow. But truly it's about being on a different track in life. There's 2 paths. One is kind of the slow, muddy, stuck path where, yeah, we're standing still, but we're standing still maybe too much. And then things kind of go on repeat. Like we keep making the same mistakes over and over again. We don't seem to really get the lessons. I've been there before, let me say. How about you, Laura?
Definitely.
Yeah, you're like, wait, this has already happened to me, like in a different way or in a different time, right? On the other path, the growth path, you have less of that like same repeat of mistake cycle. Things can still be muddy for sure, but we're also kind of willing to look at the mud, and we're willing to say, okay, what can I do differently to grow and shift? And that's why the growth path, I think, is different. And life starts to kind of take on new meaning when that happens.
I love that. Yeah, and just taking out some of the like judgment or criticism about it. But it's really that growth mindset. I love that. And the grow to glow, or, that's such a good analogy and way to think about that.
Yeah, I mean, I'll share like on my own journey to personally growing. I was stuck for a lot of years. I was stuck really in a life that I didn't love. I don't think I totally realized it at the time. And that's what's kind of hard about not being on the growth path. Maybe you're making those same mistakes. You do feel stuck, but you don't always realize that like things could be better, right? So if you're listening today and you're like, I don't know, is there really a possibility of having, the life that I desire? For me on the outside, things looked fine. They looked pretty good, probably to most people. I had a loving husband, nice home, a good job, family, friends. Things look good, but I was stuck. I didn't have that glow on the inside. I wasn't living on purpose. I wasn't fulfilled. And really anything that kind of came my way, I think just seemed hard. You know, it wasn't for me. It wasn't really till I was willing to look at myself that I was able to start making changes. So when we talk about this first step, be willing to be on the journey,
Mhm.
it's about looking at yourself first. And I think when I was more stuck and not willing to do that, it's so much easier to kind of point the finger,
Mhm.
either to blame others or just not even others, but just excuses, right? About why things aren't how you want them to be. And that's when you start sinking into that mud where you're like, really, I am stuck here because you're not empowering yourself. I think what happened for me is when I finally was so burned out and just fed up, I threw my hands up and I was like, help, I need help. I need support. I need to find a new way. That's when the growth path really started opening up. And I said yes to that journey. I had no idea what the personal growth journey would really look like. But I will say this, I believe the journey is possible for every single person who desires to go on it. So for everybody listening today, we're all growing and changing, and it looks different for each person. But if you're willing to do it, that path can open up for you.
Mm, I love that. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's so inspiring. Just like that, everything is figure outable kind of belief at the core of it. Like even if you
Yeah.
don't know, like you said, even if you don't know the total path of how it's going to happen, just kind of having that belief and that faith that it will happen.
Right. The belief in faith is so important. And then also it can feel really scary too, right? Because it's like, oh my gosh, I'm going to do something different. But I love what you said, Laura. It's those baby steps. You take
Mhm.
those small steps. What would you say as a tip for our listeners who, yeah, they're willing to do step one? They're like, okay, I'm willing to be on the journey, but it does feel scary. Like it feels scary to get started, or it feels scary when things don't go my way right away. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, gosh, I feel like we could spend our whole time just talking about this, but I just kind of a practical tip, and I think especially for our students who are going through the certification program or who are considering going through the certification program, is first of all, try not to do it all at once. Like so often we have this like now kind of like impulsive, like I want it done yesterday. And like you said earlier, like growth doesn't happen overnight. And so I think like one sort of like tangible way to think about this is, like not signing up for more than one training program or personal development program at a time, unless you truly have the time and energy to commit to it. And then you just want to make sure it, directly relates to your current goals. And so like one of the things that I do, because I know many of us, Suzanne, I think you're the same way, and I'm sure a lot of people would raise their hands, are sort of these lifelong learners, and we love to learn. It's like I would say if like somebody would pay me all day long just to like study or read or take a program, I'm
Yeah.
in. But so what I've had to do is really keep this like someday training list, or the someday, reading list or something, because, I come across programs or trainings or mentors or opportunities all the time that I'd love to do. They're, of such interest, but they don't always fit with my goals, or the time, energy, and money at that time. So I think it's really about, keeping that running list that it might fit later on in my goals. And so then when you do sign up for a training program or a personal development program, the first thing I always do is kind of like look at the, curriculum, or look at, the overview, and like put in all the classes, the training calls, any other known commitments for that program, put it into your calendar. And then also, and here's a part that I feel like I didn't do in the beginning, I feel like sometimes people miss, is to also schedule in time each week to study and actually implement what you're learning. So it's that implementation. I know, with the IAWP, like that's such a huge part, that immersive training, or the immersive transformation, is really applying, what you're learning. So really being clear on that, and then communicating that schedule to your family, anyone else, who might be impacted by this, this new schedule, if it's a new program that you're going through. So it's just one kind of like tangible tip. I'd love to hear maybe your thoughts on that, or if there's
Yeah. Well, I love that you said, like, okay, you can sign up for something, you can be all organized about it, but like, if you're just reading through stuff, but you're not implementing it, you're not going to get the most out of it. So yeah, your step one is, be willing to go on the growth journey, but that's more than just, okay, I'm doing another program or another personal development thing, or I'm reading another book. It really is that application piece. I love that you mentioned that. And of course, you're always so organized with having your schedule and blocking everything. And so I think that really helps, right? Because you carve out that time, right?
Yeah.
But for people to hear that, like, yeah, okay, if I take on too many things, so they all sound of interest, like there's no way you're going to fit all those things into your schedule. And I love that you said, okay, there's this someday thing out there, someday training or someday thing I want to do. And I think that's huge. Even if you have your little notebook and you put that in there, because you're actually going to get more out of it if you kind of schedule when it's going to be best for you versus, okay, I'm going to do all this at once. And I've seen people do that, and then they aren't able to really apply anything. They're just taking in so much. So I love that you said that. And I would say to anyone who's listening right now, if you aren't happy or fulfilled or really feeling lit up by life, then there probably is something more for you. It's definitely possible to create a life you love, but you have to be willing to grow and do the work and implement, as Laura said. And it's also both inner work and outer work. So I think it starts with the inner work though. And again, that can be challenging. It will definitely be worth it, but you can start today with a small step of just saying, yes, I'm willing to go on the journey. And then simply start asking yourself, what you need to do next. I truly believe you have the answers within you. Things can really start to show up for you. I've seen that happen for so many people in our community. As soon as they said, I'm opening up to doing this, like maybe they found the IAWP or they found this podcast or something happened where something showed up and they ended up going a different direction, right? So I think we're being guided on the growth path if we're willing, but that's just kind of something to keep in mind. For you, it might be, I want to do some sort of program or training, or maybe it's like you said, Laura, you just want to read a book that's really important to you. It might be that you need to do some journaling or just making some time for yourself to get clarity on what growth is for you. So growth, it's not just about ourselves. I think it also has this ripple effect, really. It goes out and impacts how we show up and how we impact other people in our life, which kind of brings us to our second step, Laura, which is share your growth journey with others. Step 2, share with others, right? You can be willing to go on the journey yourself, but like, you're not like living in a box, right? I think too often we do go on the journeys alone. They can be the inner journeys or things that we need to dive in deep with ourselves. But the challenge is we can feel really alone, like nobody understands what we're going through. And that can be lonely. And I think the bigger impact of not sharing our journey is that when we come out the other side of it, when we go on a growth journey, we come out the other side of it, we feel changed. We feel even like a new person. But if we didn't bring anybody along for the journey, sometimes we're like, wow, like I'm way over here and people are over here. I know I can say that's kind of been part of my journey with all the personal development and growth work I've agreed to take on for myself over the years. It's really been a solo journey for me at times. And I think as I talk about this now, the hardest part of that is seeing that I probably didn't include a lot of people along the way. I may have lost friendships or relationships or close connections because on the other side, I had kind of pivoted too much or grew too much in a way that maybe some of those relationships didn't align anymore. And I don't think that's entirely a bad thing, right? Because as we grow, we often have to find new people and new communities that can support us. But looking back now, I would say I also think that you can bring others along on your journey. You don't have to go it alone. And by doing so, it can help you to create authentic connections with people and for them to stay connected to you, even if you are growing and maybe they're growing in a different way. I mean, you can inspire other people. So maybe it's about finding those close connections of those people who know are going to support you on the journey, and then being willing to share and bring those people on the journey. I'll say that. I think on the flip side, though, sometimes we go on a journey of growth, we learn so much, and then we think it's our job to convince everyone in our life about what we've learned. I know I've tried that too. That doesn't work either. We don't need to solve everybody's problems. I could say that usually doesn't work. Unless somebody's like really raising their hand saying like, what have you been doing? Or how did you make this happen? Then it's a little bit different. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that, Laura?
Oh, I just love that you brought up both sides of that because it's so true. Like, I feel like often there's a disconnect because we don't bring, those closest to us on our journey with us. Or I see a lot of times where, if it's new coaches we're talking about, like they don't want to tell their audience or their, people on Facebook or whatever, like what it is that they're up to, and then it is often more surprising at the end, like, oh, I didn't even know you had interest in this because we never really
Right.
even brought them along on the journey. So that there's that piece of it. And then there's also exactly what you just said. And I actually saw just kind of out in the audience, like a lot of people kind of, laughing or smiling because I think a lot of people can relate to the other side of it too, where we try to like convince everybody, well, we want to tell them everything we've learned. And it's hard because we have learned so much and we have such amazing information to share, but it's like knowing sort of when and how and to the right person, which I think is kind of what we're, heading into a little bit next. So yeah, maybe
Yep.
I'll talk about that piece a little bit of like, holding the space for others. It's kind of like it's that versus, and I don't know if I like that word versus, but like, it's like trying to solve everybody's problems or sort of giving that unsolicited advice. And really what I find, and I think this is pretty common, is like most of the time our clients come to us, not because they don't know what to do, because I don't know if you've heard this, I'm sure others out there have heard this, like, or maybe we've even said it ourselves, like, I know what to do, I'm just not doing it. And I don't really know why, so they're coming to us often because, our clients are coming to us often because they want to feel validated, they want to feel heard, they might need help uncovering why they're not doing what they feel they quote should be, and that's really where I think coaching strategies like, uncovering the obstacles and ecology checks and things like that can be really, really helpful. And often they need the support and the accountability, to make the changes, so it's like if we just jump right into solving their problems and, giving unsolicited advice, we really miss an important opportunity, to help them shift their mindset. Maybe it's to make a change, to somehow improve their life. So it's kind of about teaching them and, holding that space for them to uncover their own inner wisdom and their own clear next steps. And then once we've done that, and we've fully helped them step into their next step, then we can add some additional strategies or resources. So it's kind of that both and.
Yeah, I love that. And I think, if you're listening today and you're not a coach, this isn't even on your radar, you're just thinking about living well, this whole idea is also like you can apply to yourself or to your
Mhm.
relationships, right? I think so often we do try to convince people in our life, or we try to be the person with all the answers. And you can do as Laura's saying, you can really hold the space for people to really make those empowered decisions themselves. For those of you who are holistic wellness coaches joining us live, another great way to think about this is to really apply what Laura's saying to your signature system and coaching. And I get this question all the time, like, what is the difference between those two things? Your signature system is the roadmap that you offer your clients to go on with you, right? It might be 6 or 7 steps along this journey to some specific goal. But the biggest question I get is, how does that really match up with coaching your clients in a session, right? And that's really the beauty. Coaching is about what Laura's saying. It's about holding that space. It's about asking powerful questions. It's about being the guide, not the guru, as we always like to say. And the signature system are the steps along that journey. But here's the difference. The steps are only a roadmap. They're kind of like a travel plan. They aren't set in stone whatsoever, right? And so you use coaching to move through those steps, right? To help you work with people and guide them on the roadmap. But just know that the journey, no matter how much you have this plan of, your agenda of what you want people to do, the journey is going to look different for every person. And I think that's a real growth point for coaches who are joining us and listening, because when they learn that they can hold the space, the cool thing is you realize, okay, you don't have to offer up every solution that you have, right? Even though you're like, oh, I know I can tell this person what to do. And just know that part of the support means knowing that they have the answers within and being that guide to help them to tap into that. So, and for those of you who, that's not your path, you're not on this track to becoming a coach, I just want to say, I think that still applies to helping other people in your life, right? Like it's so we want to tell people what to do. We want to kind of send them down what we think is right. But like usually that just doesn't work out, right? Like being there for someone, asking questions, letting them kind of find the path and then acknowledging them. Those are really some of the best first steps to helping someone to go on a journey as well of their own personal growth journey.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's step 2, right? So step 2, share your growth journey with others. And you can do this whether you're in business for yourself, whether you're a coach or you're wanting to become a coach, or you simply just want to apply this to your own life and helping others. Let's talk about step 3 though. Step 3 is stay a lifelong learner, which Laura mentioned before. Hey, lifelong learners. It's a trap. No, just kidding. It's a good thing, but it can be a slippery slope. This is okay. Lifelong learning. It's all about, first of all, identifying what's next for you on your personal growth journey and continuously adding to your toolbox when needed. So this really is kind of going back to what we talked about before, but if you're in a career that you love, where you want to keep growing, right? Which we see a lot in the health and wellness fields and in coaching, right? Because you've made a decision, this is your passion. And when your work is your passion, you naturally want to keep growing, right? So with lifelong learning, yeah, the learning never ends. There's always more to add to our toolkits. I think the amazing thing is oftentimes we are learning for our work and what we do, but we're also learning for ourselves, right? There's really this dual impact, which is why we can be so drawn to continuously learning. Everything's connected, right? Like it has this dual purpose. You can apply it to your own life and also maybe to your clients or to your business. So that's the cool thing about it. If you're a lifelong learner, yes, stay a lifelong learner. Don't ditch the path, but kind of reflect on some of the things we said earlier, like plan it out. There's so many opportunities to grow, and then being able to apply the work you do and make that impact. And at the same time, you have to say, okay, what is important next?
Mm-hmm.
And make sure you don't get bogged down with taking on too much, because that is really a potential trap that people can fall into. I think taking in more and more information is something that can happen with lifelong learning, but then not applying it, as Laura said earlier, is where we miss the boat really. So yeah, that's a little bit on that. Laura, what tips do you have for people who are on this path of lifelong learning, whether in business for themselves, whether our coaches here or those listening who are just, yeah, I want to be the best I can be in my life and in my career and in my business or whatever it is I'm doing. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I actually wanted to give some like steps that I take to go through this process, because I think, as you're saying, like growth is amazing. However, it also can become almost a form of procrastination. I often hear things like, well, what if I just get this other certification before I start my business, or, before I really step into coaching, if that's your journey. But so I think there can be a little bit more structure to it. And so this is what I've sort of learned along the way, because I did fall into that trap. So it's really about asking for support and investing in yourself. Maybe it's your business, but it's identifying what's next for growth. And so I find that it's really hard to know, of course, what's next for growth or what supports you might need if you don't first know what you're working towards. So for example, I'm just going to take you through a little bit of like how this worked for me, just as to kind of show how this might work. But, I have just 2 goals in my business, just 2. One is a revenue generating goal, because otherwise I'm not in business. And the other is a list building goal, so that I can help more people and connect with more people. So everything I'm working on and towards in my business falls into one of those 2 goals. So I would encourage you, to get really clear, whether you're a business coach wanting to start your business or in, maybe starting a different kind of business, but just to get really, really clear on what are your, top goals, and generally like probably no more than 3, so like I said, I keep it to 2. Okay. So next, then I make a list of things that I've enjoyed doing, or, maybe think that I'd enjoy doing to help me reach those goals. And I just sort of like brainstorm. There's no like ideas off limits. I'm not judging any of the ideas or anything. So for instance, like if I know I like to be on camera, what's next for growth could be learning about editing videos. It could be, how to boost my YouTube audience. It could be how like repurposing videos. And so, and when I'm thinking about supports, perhaps it's that I need to hire a video editor or a coach who specifically, helps people, boost their YouTube engagements. That might be like one example. So once I brainstormed what could help me reach my 2 business goals, then I'm going to choose, like 1 to 3 next steps I'm going to take, and then I kind of go through that same process. Like what, if any, supports or trainings or coaching or knowledge do I need to reach those goals? And so then once I'm really clear on that, then I choose the one to start with. So I just want to be really clear. Then I choose the one to start with. And as I mentioned in the previous step, it's like, then you break it down into those mini sub steps, you schedule those mini sub steps in your calendar, and then everything just feels much less overwhelming, much more action oriented. It gives you that time, space, and energy to be able to actually implement, which, as we've been talking about throughout this call, is so critical, for growth and, for achieving growth, is really how to implement. So that's kind of the process that I go through in just determining that for myself.
I love that. I just want to kind of jump in for a second because I think it's important what you said. First of all, like, first you're like, oh, she has 2 goals, right? Like you might be sitting here thinking, like, if you're listening right now, it could be, your professional goals, your career goals, your business goals, whatever it is. And to say, okay, these are my 2 goals. I think sometimes we're like, oh, I've got so many goals in life, right? And it doesn't mean, I'm assuming, Laura, it doesn't mean like you just throw all these other goals out the window. Again, those are over here, but you're really focusing in on those 1, 2, maybe 3 things and accomplishing those before you start piling on. I love how you did that. And then you break it down into the sub steps under it. That's very cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's made a huge difference because, as I said, I was absolutely in information, like give me more and more and more information. But when you do that, I mean, that is a surefire way to burn out too, because you never have the time or the energy to actually implement any of it. So as much as as hard as that is for me sometimes, and I'm sure maybe hard for a lot of you guys watching or listening, it's really, really getting clear. Is this something I need, first of all? And is it something I need right now?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
And again, like you don't have to toss it out the window. You're like, okay, this is of interest, but maybe it's later or whatever. And I also
Mhm.
love how you're aligning your goals with what you love doing. You were like, okay, what do
Mhm.
I like doing under
Mhm.
these? And I see some people who are joining us on our video podcast side who are nodding their head live here. I
Mhm.
just want to say, I think that's so important because I remember hearing once somewhere that our vision can come sometimes in a work suit, which is like basically where we initially get excited about the vision, but then it's like really wrapped up in a lot of things that we have to do that feel like work
Mhm.
to get there. So I think when you're really on the right track, the majority of what you're doing, it's not going to feel like work, but because it's something you love to do. But on the flip side, there are going to be things on the journey to reaching your goals that might sort of feel a little bit like work only because they require you figuring out how to do something new. Um, and so they can feel like work. I think to kind of balance this with getting out of your comfort zone and being able to ask for support when you know it's something you shouldn't be taking on. But it's interesting how you kind of focus on what you love to do
Mhm.
within reaching your goals versus like there's other ways to reach the goal, but
Mhm.
you don't like doing it or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah, because so many people hate video. So if that's you, that's okay. You don't have to feel bad about that. And so then you would want to choose a different way to reach maybe that list building goal or that revenue generating goal. So there's no right or wrong or only one path or one way to do it. It's really, yeah, finding the joy in it, kind of as you were saying too, and then choosing that one or maybe 2
Right,
ways.
because if you're on the path to following your passion, you're on the path to dreaming big. Like I hope it's fun, right? Like yeah, there's going to be those ups and downs, but for the most part, you want to be doing stuff you love to do. That's why you've made this decision to go on this path. But yet all of a sudden, you're out there and you're like, "Oh my gosh, there's so many hats to wear and so many things to do." So yeah, it's interesting to hear kind of how you've set that up for yourself to focus on not only what you're good at, but it sounds like also what your skill sets are. Yes, there's some new learning, lifelong learning, new skills that have to be added. But if like you just know you're not an accountant, like numbers is not your thing, maybe you could spend a lot of time learning that. But if that's not your thing, you might want to get support and outsource that. Like there's a fine line between stepping outside your comfort zone and then taking on a bunch of stuff that's going to weigh you down because it's like too far outside your skill set. I don't know if you agree with that.
Oh my gosh, yes. I completely agree with that. And I've experienced that myself. I'd love to maybe just share kind of like a personal story about like kind of how that was sort of for me in my business.
Yeah.
Because I think this can be really challenging, especially for those of you that are starting out perhaps in a new business or starting your wellness coaching business. Like I know for me, in my first 2 years of business, I didn't invest in myself or in my business, because I didn't feel I had, yet the money to be able to do so. And I didn't know, of course, I didn't know what I didn't know. And I didn't know how impactful and game changing investing in myself and my business was going to be. So I know like the first time I worked, with a private coach, like I was scared, like I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know if I'd get results. It felt like a lot of money at the time to give away. And that's also how I like thought about it, was like, oh, this is money leaving my account. I don't like that feeling. And so it was hard, but I was feeling so stuck and so overwhelmed and absolutely near burnout. So I knew like something changed, and so I did. I was like, okay, then I will try this one thing at least once, this one time I'm going to try to reach out and get support. And I mean, it felt like a light switch was finally turned on. It was like, not only did I get free from feeling stuck and feeling overwhelmed, but I just gained like much more clarity. I made a pivot in my business I was super excited about. Just things started to flow so much more easily, out of me. And I ended up actually having more time because I was no longer so drained trying to like serve everyone. And, I could just get things done so much quicker because I was super clear sort of on who I was talking to and who I was serving. And, of course that translates into everything. That translates into your time, your energy, translates into your, your income, your impact in your business. So, I mean, it just was a game changer for me. So whether that's support is, as you mentioned, like a bookkeeper, or maybe it's a virtual assistant, maybe it's a business coach, maybe it could be, I mean, it could be various different things. Maybe start with one, identify the biggest need or the biggest time, not time waster, but the biggest thing that you most struggle with, or you really, really hate, as you mentioned with like the numbers or whatever, and really look at what supports might I need. And it's really an investment. It's not, I'm just giving somebody money. It's this investment, and really thinking about like, what is your time worth? And really, I used to be this like, oh, I can do it cheaper, better, faster, or whatever. So I'm not going to hire somebody. And that's just not true, especially for some things that I'm not as skilled in, or, it just makes more sense to have somebody who does that to,
Yeah.
to do that for me.
I love that, because you're like, you were stuck, but then you're like, okay, I'm going to get support. Getting support can feel uncomfortable. And I think for everybody listening, like, people today are in burnout, right? Like things are so out of balance, but yet we're not willing to like get that support because it feels like, oh, I shouldn't do that for myself, right? So I think that's a huge mindset shift right there, really, Laura, about like, it's kind of, we said, be willing to go on the journey. I think part of willing to go on the journey is to be supported, to ask for and look for support. And it might be something really small. It might be just asking someone to help you, or it might be, working with a health and wellness coach, or it might be taking your business to the next level, whatever it is, but it could be something small. And I think that's part of the practice, is like, if you've never asked for support with anything on the journey, like you are that go it alone person, but yet at the same time you feel out of balance, you feel stuck, just try it. Like try one small thing. Like don't make it so huge. Like, oh, I'm going to invest and do this big thing. Like try one or two things to see what that feels like. Because what I heard you say, Laura, is that like when you did, it was like this relief for you that not only created clarity, but it opened up so many other opportunities. But you don't realize that when you're when you're kind of in the stuck place, you're like, okay. And it feels like all or nothing too. It's like, oh, I either stay here or I do something radically different. Like if you're just starting out on the path to living well and dreaming big, like you you can do something small. It doesn't have to be huge, right? And you take those small steps, which really brings us back to what we were talking about kind of at the beginning of this episode. Be willing to go on the journey, but start taking those small steps. I think that it can show you, oh, here's what's possible. Here's what it feels like. And then you kind of keep taking more steps.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I love that. Yeah, I'm such a big fan of tiny habits, just like, let's start with something really small. As you said, really see how that feels, really try that on, really get more comfortable being uncomfortable and learning to kind of like trust in that process. And then you sort of up level or maybe add on more supports, in time, but start with that one small step.
Yeah. And if you're listening today, I would encourage you as this episode ends, or even right now, if you're not driving, you have a paper and pen in front of you. What is that one little small step? Like, just ask yourself that question. Sometimes it kind of comes from within. It's like, what's that little next small step I could take to get to where I want to go, to be supported, see what comes through, write it down. You don't even have to do it yet. Just write it down, post it up somewhere. But that's one way of applying what we're talking about today, is just asking that first question, taking that first step. I love this conversation. There's so much juicy stuff here. I want to switch gears now and go to our holistic wellness coaches who are joining us live and connect with them and hear what their thoughts are on our conversation today. And I'd love to hear from at least one person live on a breakthrough that you had today, or what you're going to do next, or what's coming through for you. Or this is also a great time to take questions. So let's pop over here to our live audience, our live participants, and see who's out there. All you have to do is raise your hand if you're on video. If you're calling in today, you can also unmute yourself and just start talking. We can check with you there. Let me see if I see any hands raised out there. And maybe that's a good question. It's like, okay, what is your one kind of small next step, right? If it's asking for support or it's doing something different. And maybe it's just one thing that you picked up during our conversation today that you're like, okay, that's kind of what I need to do next. So it's always fun to hear from you guys live out there. Don't be shy. Oh, I see Tripta out there. Let me give you a... Hi there.
Hey there. Good,
How are you?
Good, thanks. Doing well.
Good to see you.
I am one of those people who signed on for a lot of courses.
Been there.
Yeah, and it wasn't for, it was to find out more, but I've also, in my journey of signing up for these multiple courses, also come to the realization that I was working with a limiting belief. One where I thought that I didn't know enough to warrant, that kind of a response, because I switched lines. And so I needed to know more and more and more about this line to be perfect and to be able to, so can you hear all the, perfection? I need to know more. Just so many things that keep you going down different rabbit holes and not getting to your potential, actually. So I just wanted to share that. I learned about that, which is why it's taken me a year not to finish the IAWP program, just to let everybody else know. So, right.
Well, thanks.
And now I'm on track.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks for sharing that, Trip. I think that's so, just to hear somebody who's like, hey, I'm doing it and here's why I did it. What happened to you? I'm just curious that you like kind of woke up to this and you realize, oh, wait, I need to like hit pause and like finish something or get it. Like, was there an awakening moment, or did it just kind of like come to you, or what happened?
A sense of overwhelm.
Yeah.
And also about finding out my own values, or not. I wouldn't say finding out. So I do like to honor commitments, including commitments to myself. But at the same time, this sense of not being good enough for the new role that I was signing up for led me to sign up for all these things. And it was a total sense of overwhelm, which contradicted my value system. And there was cognitive dissonance that was going on. And I had to just say, okay, I've got to stop something. And that cooled my heels. It really did.
Well, I think you've shared some real gems just in hearing your story because first of all, you felt that overwhelm, right? So that's like a really good sign to you. You might be like, hey, I love learning. I love taking on more. Like, it's not a problem for me. Like if you don't feel overwhelmed, like it's all good, right? But you start getting those warning signals like Tripta did. And then you're like, okay, I got to look at this differently. And you were willing to do that, which you're willing to be on the journey. You're like, okay, something's coming up here. I'm taking a look at it. So I think that's really huge.
Mm-hmm.
I think for me, the biggest tripping point was listening in to my values of commitment and accountability, and so whilst I still coach on those areas, and when I'm coaching that out and I'm not doing it myself, that was just leading to more dissonance within me. And it was time to tune back into my little voice again.
Mm-hmm.
I'm so glad you did. I want to pull out one other thing you said that I think it's kind of interesting for people to maybe hear is that as you kind of went down the path, you realized, okay, some of these things I've taken on because, I don't think I'm good enough, or I'm not ready yet, or I need to know more. And you maybe discovered that a little bit later after you took all this stuff on, you had those warning signals. But for everybody else listening today, like you can do that now. You can basically fast track Tripta's kind of experience here. And when you get ready to want to do something new, like maybe it's just as simple as pausing, getting out the journal and saying, okay, why am I doing this? There might be some reasons, like I really want to do this. I really want to learn about this. Like I have time and space, but is there anything else? Am I doing it to prove something to someone or to add more to my resume and instead, just keep procrastinating or whatever? I think some of the things you shared, Tripta, can help people to kind of like do that check before they even go to the next step and make sure that it aligns.
Totally. Glad I could serve that opportunity up.
Well, thanks for sharing your experience with us. That was awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else out there want to share any experiences you've had, any next steps you want to take on this journey today? We always love to hear what your thoughts are. Or it's also a great time to ask questions, right? We've covered kind of a lot of different things today. Let's break it down if we need to. I see Deborah is out there. Let's go over to you, Deborah.
Oh, I wasn't expecting this to happen. I thought I'd dealt with this already. I think it's just the fact of saying it and letting it out, which I've had already. So last Friday, I had a bit of a silly argument with my husband about cooking some pak choy. And weirdly, out of that came, I broke down like that. And I said, I'm just doing too much. And I think, that's what you talked about here. And because doing the full-time job, and then I really want to progress with this course. It means a lot to me. So I don't want to sacrifice this, but then by doing that, I'm not taking the time for myself. So every evening, because I block myself some study time. So like Monday night, Wednesday night, Saturday, but then Tuesday I have yoga, Thursday I have maybe practice client call. So in the end, I'm doing something every day, as well as the work, which is getting really busy. And I think with the winter, it's kind of draining more of your energy. And yeah, I just came to that point and I realized I need to stop for a bit. It feels good now to have that. Thank you for this workshop. It's great. It just showed that it's important. You want to keep going, but if you keep going too much, you won't go where you want to go. So it's important to take time, and even I think you were saying earlier to implement what you learn. I should be the first one to have taken that time for myself. rather than keep going on and on and on. So actually this week I have done that. I had 2 nights doing nothing. And that felt much better already. And I think for me, then the next step will be just, see that one small step. What do I need right now? What is the first thing? Maybe reread all the course. I was thinking, go back to the beginning because I'm module 10 now, and get that knowledge back in before I move on with things.
Wow, I love that you shared that. I was actually thinking one thing was like this workshop and you being here on this call is happened for you, you know, not to you. This happened for you to kind of further like solidify what you learned last Friday in that discussion with your husband. So I'm really glad that we're all glad you're here and shared that. I always like to say too that like with self-care, I always start with what can I clear? You know, and I know we're not necessarily specifically talking about that today, but just, you know, in order to grow, sometimes the first step is what can we clear? Like what's maybe no longer serving us? What is taking up too much of our time and energy? What is maybe not like in alignment with our values or our goals? So it can be focused first on clearing. And then I think also lastly, I just wanted to add, like, I think often I hear this a lot of like, I'm doing nothing or I'm taking a break or things like that. And I would maybe suggest like reframing that just a little bit to where maybe it's I'm recharging, I'm recovering. So you're actively doing things that are going to allow you to take more steps forward. Or I'm resting, you know, whatever that language is that resonates for you and for each of us. But to kind of shift that a bit, because that is definitely doing something. So glad you shared though, Deborah.
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, I like definitely the shift in what I can tell myself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing, Deborah, for being vulnerable. I know everyone out there is kind of like, yeah, I'm resonating with this as well. And, you know, we put a lot of pressure on ourselves, don't we? To, you know, go for our dreams or to make it happen or to just like keep going and get stuff done. But the beautiful moment here is that you kind of had that breakdown moment and you allowed that to come through, and it's going to happen at the craziest time. You're just like cooking or whatever, right? It's going to happen in some other way. It's going to seem like something so small. And I think if we can look at those little small signals and say, okay, there's something bigger going on here for me. And you were willing to do that. And you took the first step. You carved off a couple of days from your schedule and you're like, hey, what does this feel like? I think one reason we don't do it and we let the pressure keep building is that we feel like it's all or nothing. Like I got to keep on this crazy same path or I'm totally going to do nothing. Right. And so we tell ourselves like something about that story. I know for myself, I was under the weather for a few days and I'm still stuck in this pattern. I start to be like, oh no, I can't take a break. I got to keep on. There's so much to do. Right. And then you just got to stop and you're like, oh my gosh, like what, there I am again. Right. So there's this awareness piece that you, Deborah, I commend you for. You allowed that to come through and you took the action, you applied it, you took a couple days and now you see what happens next. You're like, hey, maybe I need more, or maybe that was enough. So I think that's awesome. And you're listening to yourself.
Thanks.
Thanks for sharing, Deborah. Anybody else out there? Questions, things you're going to apply from our conversation today? Oh, I see someone else.
Hi, Suzanne.
Hi.
Yeah, this is Kelly. I'd just like to say that, hi, I'm in California, so it's nice, sunny, and warm here. But
oh, nice.
I just wanted to say that with the growth process, I think honoring where we're at and really absorbing the space that we're in during the times of these growth processes to really feel what's happening within us is just as important as trying to take the actions to move forward. So, you know, when I was listening to Deborah, you know, she was honoring where she was at that moment. And that's growth right there. And I just wanted to commend her on that. And yeah, we all feel that. And sometimes we put more pressure on ourselves because we feel like, oh my God, I'm not doing this. Or like, I still need to work on my signature system and I'm giving myself the hardest time on it. And yet I'm like, but I'm not ready. I'm not ready to complete it. So I like that growth is honoring where you're at too.
Oh, I love that, Kelly. Thank you for sharing. I think you're absolutely right.
Sure.
And I love that you kind of pulled that out for us, right? Because we tend to, or our ego tends to define growth as just taking action, right? But growth is both inner and outer, as we kind of talked about today. But you've made an important point to say that inner work and the outer work, they're both growth, right? But for some reason, we only allow one or the other, we judge it, right? So I think that's huge. And I appreciate you sharing that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Sure.
growth
We
is
just
more
tend to
than-
make it more of a physical. We make it more like growing means that you have to visibly see it, but we don't always see it. It's something that's happening internally too.
Yeah, that brought up for me too. Like growth is more than just crossing something off your to-do list.
Yeah. But it feels so good.
I know, but then put your recharge time on your to-do list. Then you can cross that off.
You're like, okay. And I think we have these different energies, right? It's kind of like balancing this. We've been just conditioned to think that the doing and the taking action, like that's what's valued in many societies, right? That's really kind of that masculine energy. This isn't about male or female. It's just about the fact that these two energies exist within all of us. But for some reason, that masculine piece, that doing, taking action, succeeding part often has kind of, is best friends with the ego in a sense. And then the other part, that inward part, which maybe more is the feminine part of all of us, again, men and women, we all have it, that pulling back, that waiting till the time is right, as Kelly said. That's a different energy and they both have equal value. And it's really about being willing to look at that and kind of balance that for ourselves. But it can be hard, especially based on our upbringing or experiences or just our own beating ourselves up along the way. Juicy stuff. Good topics, everybody. Anyone else have something else they want to say on the live line? I see Joy's out there. We'll give Joy a microphone.
Thank you.
Joy.
Thanks. Hi, Suzanne. Hi.
Hi, Joy.
Thanks so much for this workshop. It's been great. I think something that came up for me was where you talked about sharing the journey with others. For me, I started my own little business a number of years ago, about 5 years ago, making lampshades, and that created me to become, this negative gossip got out about me, and it became a sort of a target, and I felt like I was bullied at the time, which I think I was, and so I was really scared to share that I was starting something different when I started doing this 2 years ago. But actually, I started my social media account in January this year, and I was very much doing everything alone because I didn't want anybody in my community, because at the time it felt massive. We had to move our children to another school. We did a lot of things because I just felt very, very alone. But actually what happened when I started my social media account in January, it was slow, and it was, I suppose I was playing small. I was trying to keep myself safe. But I shared my story on social media about, I think it was for about 6 weeks ago after finishing module 6 or 7. And it's been an absolute game changer, because you sort of feel like everyone's out there judging you and doesn't like you, or whatever I had, sort of felt before. But actually I've managed to get loads of clients off the back of that, and feel like now I have this tribe that's with me, and almost, becoming friends in a way. So if you're someone out there who is sort of worrying about, sharing what you're doing, I would really say go for it. It is really scary, but it really was, a big game changer for me.
Wow. I love that you shared that. I mean, you know what, like for you too, and I commend you, because I think it feels scary to anybody, but now you're coming off of, you sort of had PTSD really, because you did do something and there was this judgment and negative piece around what happened. And most people just say, I'm never doing this again. So the fact that you said, I am going to still do this, even though it is even scarier than maybe it would be for most people. And then the fact that, you know, you had a positive reaction, it can help heal that past piece of it. And I think the other thing is like, yeah, there's always going to be the haters or whatever. There's always going to be people judging. Right. But like, I think I don't know if it was Wayne Dyer or somebody who said, I'm independent of the good opinion of other people, right? Like we have to almost have that mindset when we're on the path to really playing big and dreaming big, because we're going to be out there supporting and helping the people that are the right fit and the right connection. Along the way, there might be other things that happen, but if we stay focused on that, I think personally that can help us to get through some of those obstacles. But I'm so glad that you made that shift and you just went for it, even though it was a little scary.
Yeah, it was I think it was a nine minute video, but I think it goes back to that feeling, you know, that passion when you so desperately want a change and to stop something. Or in my opinion, I didn't, you know, the negative, the judgment just did not agree with me at all. So I guess that probably gave me strength to share. But yeah, I just want to share that. Yeah, that was really something that came forward for me. I think it's great. It really makes a huge difference when we can share what we're doing, because it is lonely sometimes. Yeah, so thank you.
Thanks for sharing. Yeah, be willing to bring others on the journey with you. You were willing to do it, right? It had this positive impact, but it can feel scary for sure, but you take those small steps and you kind of see what happens. And you know what? You might have been like Joy and you put something out there and you maybe hear crickets or you don't get a positive reaction, right? It can be really easy to just pull back in and say, okay, I'm never doing that again, right? But like that time is coming. There's going to be that time when it does resonate, when it is a good fit, when it does make sense. And so I love what you said, Joy. It's kind of like the passion piece is so more important. And it's really that the passion piece and the desire to share and help people and share your gifts and make that impact becomes bigger than all that fear and judgment that may or may not exist of doing it. So, you know, which becomes the bigger piece is what it comes down to. And I think as you work through that, you realize, yeah, this is worth it, but it doesn't always come through right away. That's for sure. Well, it was so fun being with everybody today and having this conversation together and hearing from those who are joining us live with some of the stories that are going on in your life. Very fun to be here today. And also with you, Laura, hashing out another exciting topic here.
I love it. Thanks so much for having me here. And thank you to all of you that are here or listening and just sharing your stories, as you said, and your time.
Thanks, everybody, for joining us today, and we'll talk to you again very soon. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye. Thank you for joining me for today's episode of Live Well, Dream Big. I hope you enjoyed today's conversation, and I want to invite you to take your next step toward living well and dreaming big by downloading the Live Well, Dream Big lifestyle book. It's the ultimate guide to becoming your best self and living life on your own terms. You can grab your complimentary copy by going to the link in the show notes or heading directly to IAWPwellnesscoach.com/guide. That's IAWPwellnesscoach.com/guide.